this, but I'm going to start. All right. Well, welcome to today's episode of the Silkin podcast. I am happy to bring to you today Mr. Dave McKevitt in our series of Wise Words from Dave. And so, Dave, welcome. Thanks for taking the time to be here. And why don't we go ahead and get started by just giving us some information, some background about yourself. How did you get into consulting?
Okay. Well, consulting is highly related to teaching. My background was I was a teacher and also in the administration of a private school many years ago. And at one point, I had the privilege of being sent down to Los Angeles for like 2-semester intensive training in management at the Hubbard College of Administration. Yeah, so I could bring that information, that knowledge back and apply it to improving the efficiency of the administration of the school, which I did. And I loved it. I loved the management technology I was exposed to. It's exceedingly sane and validative of all members of a group. And circumstances in life led me to leave the school, and I connected up with some friends of mine, old friends of mine, who had started in combination with a chiropractor in San Francisco, a consulting company for chiropractors. And because of I didn't know anything about chiropractic, but I knew about the management technology, which is the technology that this chiropractor had used to build the largest chiropractic clinic in the world. And it was. He had like 11 doctors under his roof. It was a big show.
Wow.
So I quickly got oriented to what I needed to know about chiropractic and started taking on clients and consulting them on management and loved it. And I've been doing it ever since.
That's awesome.
And I still do it because I still love it. So yeah. I guess that's kind of a nutshell runway to where we are now.
Beautiful. It is enjoyable, isn't it? It's enjoyable being able to help another and watch them just take a step, even if it's a small step closer to their goals, and watch their enthusiasm come back to, what seems to be like what they've always set out to do, and achieve big things in life. So I would agree with you on that.
Yeah, based on the fact that the laws and principles of organization and management are universal. Mm-hmm. And they are very sane. Mm-hmm. And so in my consulting career, I've actually been exposed to many different kinds of business, completely unrelated to the healthcare profession. And I've always been able to walk in and determine what the issues are with solutions. In other words, you can define what the problems are if you know what the basic principles of sound management are. You can see the departures or the violations of those principles and define them and tackle them.
Exactly. And I think an important point that you brought up there is that you have to, in order to be able to spot those things, right, you have to know what the ideal scene is. You have to know what the proper way something or an organization or practice should be running, right, in order to spot those, or else you just don't know what you're looking at, and right, wrong, or indifferent, you have no idea, and things kind of just go on a whim. So
yeah, that simple concept itself opens the door to being able to look at anything sanely. So absolutely agree. It's a great concept. It's a piece of the management technology.
Excellent. Well, let's get into today's topic a bit. We're definitely keying in on personnel and building the right team and establishing that and the nuances of it, the do's and the don'ts, because as we all know, that if you don't have the correct personnel, you don't have the right people on your team, it may not necessarily not ever go right, but it becomes very difficult and very time consuming and kind of treacherous to deal with. So I'll go, from your viewpoint and your experience, and in this day and age, when you look at that concept and that idea, right? I know it's probably a pretty large concept because there's many factors to it. What do you see as potentially the biggest, mistake owners can make in that area?
Well, this day and age, because, and there's truth to this, there's truth to the statement that I hear over and over that good staff are hard to find. Now, I've been hearing that for the last 30 odd years of doing consulting. I'm hearing it at an exponentially higher rate these days. And there is some truth to it, but it's not something that you want to allow to have the impact on you of lowering your standards. And clients have an inclination to want to just get a warm body in there to some degree. Not a good strategy. So there are good people out there. As difficult as it may be to find them, they are out there. And I counsel my clients to keep looking until you find them. And of course, there are strategies for expanding the zone or area in which you're looking. Sometimes clients are by habit just kind of looking in their immediate area. Well, sometimes it can be useful to look in neighboring areas or even remote areas. Let's say if you're in a rural town and putting an ad in a city uh, publication of some kind, inviting them to come out for the country life. There are people that is attractive to. So sometimes you can just narrow your scope of search too much.
Mhm.
And keeping it broad is the first thing I think is important to do.
Right. And then with that, because yeah, I mean, obviously the bigger you can draw from, I think most likely, the more um, the better candidates you're going to have to choose from. You obviously want to have some choices in that. But with that, in terms of finding the right, we hear finding the right fit, right? They don't fit our culture. I think sometimes that becomes one of the harder parts in hiring in practices and businesses. How do I know that this person I'm choosing is going to be the right fit and is going to fit my culture? Sometimes just by asking some rote questions or looking at, their resume doesn't always seem to paint the right picture. Do you think, would that be a correct statement?
Absolutely. People know how to do interviews. They know how to paint the good face on things and say the right things for the purpose of an interview. But one of the things, if you've got a number of applicants, and this used to not be a problem. Pre-COVID, this was not very much of an issue. COVID and since, it's been much more of an issue, is getting enough applicants to be able to do a procedure that we call group hiring. We used to have clients do group hiring sessions with 10 to 15 people. That's pretty rare this day and age in my experience. But even if you only have two or three, it's valuable. In fact, if you only have one person come in, it's still a valuable process. And ultimately, you're looking for people, just as you're saying, Julia, that will truly own or resonate or buy into your mission statement, what your practice is all about. That informs the culture you have in your practice. And in the group hiring process, part of that process is which by the way only takes about a half an hour to 45 minutes to do with a group, even up to 10 people. But the first part of that process is you give them a short presentation on what your mission statement and core values and purpose of your practice is. And after you've done that, you would then give them a quiz, give them paper and clipboards and a pen, and ask them to write down what is the basic underlying purpose and core values of this practice. Have them write it down for you. You would be amazed at the number of people who were not paying attention who weren't even really there. But the ones that were there and with whom this was resonating are going to give you a good response. And that's a first tip off that, okay, this person is kind of with the program. This is kind of, there might be something we can work on here. Um, uh, and after you've done that, then you would take each person individually back for a one-on-one interview, just a very short interview. And what you're really looking for here, if you want a truly non-toxic practice, you need obviously upbeat people, truly upbeat people, not doom and gloomers, not negative Nellies, people who really have a positive outlook on life and want and hence they have a genuine desire to help people, genuine from the heart. And you can ask questions in a one-on-one interview that you're not even really looking so much at what their answers are as this interesting factor. How long does it take them to formulate and give you an answer? Really upbeat people who are really with the program will give you a valid answer very quickly. People who are not quite so upbeat and with the program will have to spend more time kind of thinking about it and wandering around mentally to figure out what their answer is going to be. That's a very important indicator because senior to background or training in the subject of that you're hiring for, very, very much senior to that is that person's attitude toward life and toward the job and toward work. If they have a really, truly upbeat attitude, their willingness is going to be there, and willingness is the primary factor you have to work with to create a positive culture. Anytime there's a less than positive culture, you will inevitably discover one or more people who are not completely willing staff members. By willing,
yeah, go ahead. I was going to ask you to just touch on that willing point a little, like really define what willing, because I think it has varying degrees, right? Willing.
yeah,
So yeah, go
good.
ahead.
Yeah, it always needs defined because willing doesn't mean that they will do things. It means that they want to do things. Then that's an internal thing. You can't fake that. Well, you can fake it, but that's detectable at a certain point because they're not going to do it in a manner which shows that they're really owning it and taking full responsibility for it. So you're looking for that willingness factor, and the upbeat type people are generally going to be a lot more willing, which is why that's more important than somebody who comes in and they've got 10 years of experience in submitting insurance claims. That's great expertise. That's great background. And there's a lot of technicality to that that's exceedingly valuable. But if I have a choice between that person, if they are kind of a downscale type person, and an untrained person who's really an upbeat, eager beaver kind of a person, I'm taking the upbeat, eager beaver every time because that person is going to be trainable and they're going to own it and they're going to be good group members. They're not going to be coming in with their fixed ideas or their complaints because we don't do it the way they're used to having it done and where they've been before and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, does that answer the question for you? I'm willing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And then with that, have you ever experienced with an owner in going over this point in hiring the willing where they have hired individuals that, potentially had more experience and thought that that was the better hire and what they ran into in terms of not hiring the willing individual?
Yeah, if they're lucky, that knowledgeable person with background and training will also be an upbeat person. Best of all possible worlds, absolutely. But if they're bringing in a negative type person, it's going to be a battle to a greater or lesser degree. It's going to be a continuous battle that person is, the gears aren't going to mesh. They're going to clash. They're trying to do things different ways. They are going to be asserting their methodologies over the other staff who are already grooved into the way you do things. It adds additional confusion and complexity into the group. They arrogate to themselves a level of authority to make changes that properly they don't have. So they are not blending in as team players. They're coming in with a I know best kind of an attitude, which is not a recipe for good the development of good working relationships with the fellow staff.
Right. Right. So yeah, absolutely. So then so we get the right people. So let's say in terms of, great, so now we've hired the right people. And so we have 2 points after hiring the right people in terms of training and retention, right? Typically is great. So I've hired the right individual. Now, what do I do with them, right? To help the practice grow. Then as the practice is growing, how do I retain those individuals so that I'm not on this, which sometimes we see with clients, this kind of revolving door in terms of having to hire, because it just adds more and more work for the owner, right? So the first point I'd like to take up in terms of, we talked about, building the right team, right? And so what are those points that have to be in order for an owner and a practice to build the right team in order to take it to where they want it to go?
Well, if they've got genuinely good people, a basic thing, and you already touched on it a moment ago, is you have to train them in the procedures, processes, and protocols of your practice. They have to be trained. Don't assume that they know. Don't assume that they're going to figure it out easily themselves. Train them. If they're trained, they're going to be able to go into agreement with the other people in the office, and the gears will mesh. If they're not trained, they're going to keep having little minor conflicts and stresses that make the environment not wonderful for them. They're not winning. You want to give a new staff member an opportunity to win, and win means that they are accomplishing what you want them to accomplish. You have to lay that out very clearly in a job description. These are the exact expectations of your job. These are the functionalities associated with those end results that we want from you, and this is how you accomplish them. And you have to be willing to make the investment in time. Time equals money. That investment into these people to give them the tools with which to succeed. If you don't, and they're losing, and they're not comfortable, and they're having negative repercussions from other staff because they're not doing it the right way, but nobody told me how to do it. It's not a winning proposition for them, and they're much more likely to leave prematurely. So that's one thing. Another thing is, if you've got a really positive culture, you have to protect that on an ongoing basis. Protect that means if anybody gets in to your practice who is not really fully grooving into the cultural core values of your practice, you can't dodge that. You can't go on hoping that they're going to figure it out and how to fit in. You got to tackle it head on. Because, and I've seen this happen many times, one of those people gets into a practice and they're bringing a skill set which is valuable to the practice, but they're bringing all of the attendant stress and garbage, that baggage that comes with it. That makes the working environment much less pleasant for the rest of the staff. And people who operate that way in an out of agreement kind of know best manner can actually blow off really good, willing people. I've seen it more times than I would care to recollect. So they have to be protected. And protected means that anything which is a deviation from that ideal scene that you mentioned in terms of following our policies and protocols, and really embodying and living the core values of the practice get addressed. And many times, if they're addressed, it's not a big deal. The person's it's a one-off kind of a deal, a little issue in their life, and you need to maybe cut them a little slack. They'll swing back to battery. If it's a persistent kind of situation, you can't let it go, because if you do, you're not protecting the good people from the negative person, and that can have disastrous consequences.
That's an interesting point in terms of group, right? And protecting the group first and foremost. That I think, I have found that leadership roles and business owners alike tend to, either they don't know and aren't aware, or tend to forget at times, and it is such an important point that you have to protect the group, so valid.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely agree. And part of that is also, it ties into how you retain people. They bought into your core values and your purpose, your mission statement. That's something you don't plant when you hire somebody and now we're done with that. That's something that needs to be reviewed regularly. Every staff meeting, every muster, there can be some kind of a, however brief, comment or statement by the doctor or the office manager that supports and reorients or refocuses people on, this is what we're doing here. This is what we're all about. This is where we're going with this thing. And keep them focused on that. Um, Validate wins. Sharing patient wins with a group that have emanated from the application of those core values and the accomplishment of that mission statement. Share those, validate them. That's the deal. Putting your attention on the positives is really important. You need to handle the negatives, but you really want to emphasize and put your attention on the positives for the whole group, because that's what you're validating. That's what you're going to get.
Right. Yeah. Very good points. Now, in terms of I want to say hundreds, potentially thousands of clients that you have helped over the course of your very successful career, give us some examples, or, some kind of before and afters in terms of where the practice started prior to implementing these things, in terms of hiring the right people and then building that winning team. Where did the practice go from and then to? Where did the profitability of the practice go from and then to? In terms of you can specify on one area or one specialty or across the board.
Well, boy, oh boy, yeah, the stories are legion. In a very broad sense, doctors will come to us needing more of an established organization, more efficiency, or the purpose of organization is efficiency. And they got inefficiencies, lack of organization, and it's very frustrating to the point of becoming a situation that starts poisoning the desire to be a doctor and be in the profession. We've had numerous clients over the years that their questioning is, do I want to even keep doing this? This isn't fun anymore. But they start learning how to organize their staff and how to correct and discipline if needed their staff and direct their staff competently, effectively. Things start lining up, things start getting much more efficient. One of the big changes I hear over and over the years is, I can go home when the day is done now. I don't have to stay here until 9 o'clock doing whatever, writing up charts or following up on things that staff didn't get done, or they can go home when the day is over. It's a magical thing. Changes the quality of life for the doctors, and then that's always a great win to hear, because for one thing, that's going to add longevity to their career. Reduced longevity in career is inevitably associated with, it's not fun.
Right.
It's stressful and it's obnoxious and I hate it. And you get things running smoothly and it's not that way anymore.
Right. Right. I think it also gives them more freedoms.
Absolutely. Yeah. Nice word.
Yeah.
That's a choice word, Julia. I love it.
Yeah. I think it gives them more freedoms I think anytime you look at, why someone becomes an owner typically of a business or practice, and I think a lot of the times after talking to them, it's having that ability to have that freedom, the choice of that freedom to be there or not be there, but still have the income and still have the practice or the business producing. And I think when you have efficiency in place, you're then awarded those freedoms, you know.
And one of the beautiful that absolutely, and one of the beautiful byproducts of that can be, and we hear all kinds of stories about this from our clients, is that they now have freedom to start giving back to their community in various ways. I've had clients who become a state senator. Had a client who became a representative in the United States House of Representatives.
Wow.
Um, Clients who participate in service clubs, in different activities in their communities. A client that was instrumental in building and creating a whole community center in a disadvantaged neighborhood that's had huge positive impacts in that neighborhood. All kinds of things, and many of our clients love doing that because our clients become our clients because they're really motivated to help. They became doctors because they want to help.
Right.
That's a clean, clear internal motivation and
Right.
purpose and drive. And when they're not having to deal with all kinds of noise and confusion and stress, hey, I can help over here. I can help over
Right.
there.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Last point here I want to touch on for this segment is in terms of, you know, training and efficient staff. That's a topic we're taking up here. Handling personnel. I think it's one of the toughest jobs that business owners and office managers alike have is how do we handle personnel to keep them efficient and productive and keep staff morale high? How important is it to have systems and correct systems and specifically potentially a personnel system in place in order to achieve that?
Well, it's critical because if staff don't have clear expectations and directions, they're wandering all over the road and in both ditches and creating a lot of extra traffic and work and confusion that other people need to kind of get in, jump in and clean up. And it reduces the whole positive vibe of the practice. And it also really cuts into staff longevity. So having those kinds of systems that not only have clear expectations, but also have ways of monitoring them, which is kind of a piece of what I think you may have been alluding to. Having statistical ways of monitoring productivity of staff, not to be looking over their shoulder, but to give them a tool that they can use to enhance their own productivity. See where it's falling short or is expanding, and I need to reinforce this and keep doing more of this. It puts them more in control of their own job, which is really what part of an ideal staff member in terms of an ideal scene. You don't want willing slaves because there is no such thing. Slaves are not willing ever, or that slight degree of willingness that they have tremendously undermines the degree of potential productivity from them if they were really given their own right to own the job on their own terms and create it. So, yes, having a structure in place that promotes that and allows that and promotes it is critical. And that can be
Yeah,
done.
absolutely. Absolutely. Excellent. Well, thank you. I'd like to open it up to any questions at this time. And if you have any final words here you want to say on this topic, Dave?
I guess my final words would be building a good team can be done. It can always be done. If it's not being done, there are reasons why, and those reasons can be dealt with. And you don't have to settle for second best. You don't. And if you do, not good, you will pay a price. And if you persist and you use all the tricks of the trade that can be learned on how to find and select and train and correct and guide good staff, oh man, the sky's the limit. I mean, we have doctors who were hoping they could just run my own practice, and a couple of years down the line, they've opened a second one, then they've opened a third one, and it's running like a well-greased river. So there's hope.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you. And thank you for listening. That's our segment of the Silkin podcast and these wise words from Dave.
And from Julia. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Julia.